Hi folks, so in my last video I showed maybe a vulnerability that can quite often happen when we just check for users' memberships on the AAD or their specific email just on the client side. The client side in this case being our Canvas app, and the client side meaning running on the browser on the actual computer of the end user rather than on the server where a data source lives. So the short answer to improving the security on a scenario such as this is we should also, in addition to checking on our Canvas app, we should also have checks on the server side. We can do this in a number of ways. If we're using Dataverse, we could maybe implement these checks with a plugin. In the pre-validation stage, we could check maybe certain stuff about the user and kick back or stop the request to the database if we don't like what we see. We could also use maybe Power Automate to act as a buffer between the Canvas app and the data source. And finally, we could then, if suitable, we could actually implement a security role or some sort of security structure to not give every single user access to certain tables within the system. So I think a scenario here that would apply to is, say, if we have a table where configuration records are being stored in a Dataverse table. In that case, like, to make this easy on ourselves and to prevent ourselves from having to make really complex flows that are triggered from Power Apps or code, any validation, we can literally just remove access for that user to that specific table. That can be done, that we can add them into teams and assign roles to the teams, or we could assign the roles directly to the user. But in this case, I'm going to show a few simple methods of how we can improve the security in this scenario. So the app has changed a little bit from last time. If we look at the screen, we can see search for the string and search for the string 2. They're still here, our buttons. However, I have changed the onSelect formula. So let me make this a little bit bigger here on the screen so you can read it better. Great. So the onSelect formula right now for this button is, rather than just run the formula that we want to run, instead it's going to trigger a Power Automate flow directly from the Canvas app, and that flow's name is update configuration record.run. But the name of the flow isn't .run, the name of the flow is update configuration record. So what this button right now is doing is it triggers the Power Automate flow. The Power Automate flow then does the check on the server side as opposed to the client side. We then wait for the response from that Power Automate flow. So that does its checks. If the flow is happy with everything it finds, it will give us a positive back. Otherwise, it will send us a negative back to the Canvas app. And then I just put a quick little modal into our Canvas app that will let us know kind of, was this successful or was it not. So I will give you a quick test run of showing you how it will work. So I'm just going to go ahead and click the search for the string button. So the modal did pop up. We can see there, everything is satisfactory. The Power Automate flow did like what it saw regarding our user. So that's good. So I'm going to save and I'm going to publish this application, but before I do so, I'm going to make this button invisible so we can do our same test as we did the other day. So I'm going to save and publish. And while that's publishing, I do want to show you guys the Power Automate flow and how I have it set up. So the trigger for this flow is just a Power Apps trigger. Personally, I don't really like using these because, if we have to update a connector for this particular flow or make changes here, I find it can cause bugs in our Canvas app. Maybe, it's not able to authenticate with the Power Automate flow, and the fix there is quite annoying. We have to typically remove it and re-add it into the app. So while this works, it's a valid way of using the technology. It is not my favorite way to go. So the Power Automate flow here is just simulating a check. It triggers from Canvas apps, as we can see from the trigger. We then initialize a variable, a Boolean variable, and we just name that variable is the user valid. So it's just hard coded in here. It doesn't actually query the Azure Active Directory or anything like that. because it doesn't need to for the sake of this demonstration. So right now it's set to true. However, if I set this to false, that will mean that our simulated check will come back with a negative, and then we'll expect it to fail. So I'm going to save this, that update to our flow. And with a recent update to the Power Automate technology, we seem to have to turn off and on again the cloud flows for some reason. So I'm just going to turn our flow off, and when that's done, I'm just going to turn it back on. So let me just double check it's in fact off. It is. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back on. Brilliant. So let's go to our application. I'm going to go and run it in play mode. So we can see our second button, but we cannot see the first. So let's do the same thing we did in the last video. I'm going to open our command prompt, or our developer prompt. And when that opens, let's search for the text within the button. It'll make it easy for us. So search for this string. I might make the developer prompt a bit bigger. Search for the string. So same as last time, it has found 2 results. So I'm going to go back to the application, right click it, and click inspect. And that brings us then to the correct section of HTML code. So then if we iterate through our results, we can see, okay, that's our button there. So if we go up to the parent nodes in the HTML, we can then find button 1, same as last time. And we can see we have the style property of display none. So that's what is currently hiding this functionality. So we'll just go ahead, delete that, and it should appear in the app. Brill. So what I'm expecting to happen here is the Power Automate flow will now, because we've changed that true to a false, we're simulating the check failing. So the Power Automate flow, or the server-side check, isn't happy that we have the correct memberships, or some attribute that it can check against our user. So I'm going to click the now exposed button, and now our model has appeared with a nice Jurassic Park meme that just symbolizes a rejection. So it's different from the initial response. It's no longer true. It is in fact false now. So this is easily applicable to a scenario where you want to lock down functionality to specific groups of users, to specific users, or maybe only allow a single user to use a piece of functionality. So that's how we can implement it one way with Power Automate. The other way is, now it is always recommended to check this type of stuff on the server side. However, as far as I'm aware, we cannot in fact modify formulas from the client side either, unless, like, if we can, I would like someone to correct me and show me how it's done. But what I'm proposing here is, in addition to just hiding the element, what I want to do here is just add an extra condition. So on the client side, we'll maybe do a check when the user loads up the app, and that check could resolve to a true or false, maybe a Boolean value. So we can wrap the existing code. We can wrap the existing code in an extra if statement. And I will just put a piece of code here saying, what will I say? I will use a variable in this case. So if user is valid equals to true. Right, so Power Apps doesn't recognize the variable yet. So let's go ahead and on our unvisible property of the screen we're working, I'm just going to set that variable user is valued or valid to false. So that's going to simulate our client side check. But what we could do here, just to make it a bit more obvious of what I'm trying to achieve, is I'm just going to simulate it. Cool. So we have a comment there that, you know, that would represent the code that, say, would query the Azure Active Directory or Dataverse or wherever the deciding factor on our user is stored. So right now, user is valid is set to false. I just want to check the on start to make sure I haven't done anything else. Right, so I have fixed our condition statement, which now wraps the actual functionality within the onSelect property for our button. So right here, if I go back to the button, I'm just gonna format this nicely. So it's going to make the button invisible, and if we expose the button, the onSelect is not just going to fire when we click the button. Instead, it will do the additional checks, which in this case is set to false, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so I set it to false. So this simulates a client-side check as well. So I'm going to save and publish this app. Actually, before I go and use the app, what I might do is just go very quickly to our modal and make our rejection image appear. If the user is also invalid. So there we go. I go back and I click our functionality button. Brilliant, so we're ready to go. Save and publish. I'm going to go back over to the play version of the app, and I'm just going to refresh the screen 2 or 3 times to ensure we're on the most up-to-date version of the application. So I won't go through actually hiding the button again and exposing it, because we know how to do that now. What I want to just simulate now is the check on the server side, or on the client side. So right now, you know, we skipped a few steps. Let's just say we've exposed this button from our DOM, our HTML, and if we click it here, our client side doesn't like it. So if we go back to our Power Automate flow and we'll edit this, and we will simulate the flow to say return a positive. So the server is happy, but the client still isn't. I will save this and then we'll turn the flow off and back on again. Great, so our flow is back on and our updated logic is in there. So I'm just going to refresh the app again, just to be sure. And what I expect to happen here is for when we click the button, the rejection modal is still going to appear for us, because, you know, it is checked on the client side. For you know, there is client side checks now, not just server side checks. So the Power Automate flow is happy with us, the client isn't. So I click the button, and there it goes. We didn't say the magic word. So rejection again. So that's how I would lock it down. I would look to do it server side first. If you're using Power Automate, great, check it there. If you can use the likes of security roles to prevent the request from actually succeeding, even better. It's more straightforward. The simpler solution is usually the best in these systems. And finally, if, you know, all else fails, you could maybe use a plugin to kick back on the validation stage when someone goes to update a certain record in the system. And then in addition to all of that, on the client side, you can add checks into the functionality, the onSelect properties that you're actually looking to run. So that's all from me. Thanks for watching.